So the roof for the boat has fiberglass panels on top of an aluminum structure. And I started out when I was first thinking about this project by making a concept sketch. I took a picture of the boat from the uh, manual that came on the boat, the owner's manual, and put a roof on top of it with a whole bunch of solar panels crammed in as tightly as I could space them on it. And these were standard size panels that I was looking at the time. And it, I put curvature on the front and curvature on the back just because it's a boat and it sort of matches existing curves. I had it angled down a little bit in the bow and up a little bit in the back, um, just because I like that look to it. I had four curved supports to hold it up. Again, sort of going with, you don't want to have too many straight lines on a boat. And that was my original concept sketch. From there, everything evolved. Before we started building things at the shipyard that I was having the work done at, we did a bunch of testing of different materials and different adhesives to make sure that when we put things together, they were going to work all right. We also built test squares of different roof materials and combinations to make sure we had the stiffness correct, to make sure we had the weight correct. So at this point, I'm going to switch over to some videos of them. So this is one of the test panels, and we're going to look at how well adhered the tube is to the roof. So this would be the adhesive that is holding the panel onto the structure. Not terribly high tech, but relatively effective.
No grinds prior.
This was a different adhesive that did not pass the testing. Another adhesive, a little bit better, but still popped off. This was the mounting feet for the solar panels. It was made with G10 fiberglass angle iron, 3-inch by 3-inch by 1/4 inch. And this is glued onto the roof panel. That failed nicely. It didn't break the adhesive. It ripped the fiberglass. So that was a very good bond. And then this is a time lapse of building one of the roof panels. This is the mold that the roof panels are made of, and this is 1/2 of one roof panel. This is cardboard just sitting over it to give us more of a work surface. Roll of fiberglass cloth at the back end here. And we're going to put down 3 layers of fiberglass cloth with epoxy on each one. And then we're going to take the cardboard off and do another 3 layers so we have the full width covered. And then we're going to cover it with the structural foam that has already been pre-cut and labeled. And then we're going to vacuum bag the entire thing. So here's our first layer of cloth and all the epoxy that we're putting onto it. Then the second layer of cloth with its epoxy. Then the third layer of cloth with its epoxy. Then we took the cardboard off. Coffee break time. Quick coffee break. Then we moved the roll over to the other side and did the first layer of cloth and epoxy, second layer of cloth and epoxy, third layer of cloth and epoxy. Then we started laying the structural foam pieces in place. And once all of those were laid in place, then we put tape down all around it and put tubes over it and put a plastic film over it to vacuum bag it. And that was uh, how we made the roof panel. So these were our test pieces that we beat up to make sure we knew what adhesives were going to hold and hold well. And this was the mold that we built the panels on. You can see it's got a little bit of curvature to it, and it's about 10 feet wide and about 18 feet long. And this is the panel being vacuum bagged. This is the structural foam. We've already got the layers of glass under it, and then the foam is being vacuum bagged onto the still wet epoxy from the 3 layers of glass. After this is vacuum bagged, then we'll put 3 more layers of glass on top of it and vacuum bag that down onto it as well. And we had to do that 4 times for the 4 parts of the 2 panels. Then after we had the panels vacuum bagged and fully sealed, then I put a tint into epoxy and put down a yellow layer of tinted epoxy, rolling it on. And then I did 2 layers or 2 coats of a gray tinted epoxy, so that when we did our sanding and smoothing, we could tell that if we were getting down to any of the yellow, that was as far as we wanted to go. As long as we had gray, we were in good shape. If we started getting into yellow, that meant we were sanding a bit too much. We still hadn't touched the fiberglass, but we were starting to get thin on the epoxy. This was joining the 2 halves of the tables together. So when we got the 2 halves made, then we butted them up against each other, and then we epoxied and glassed them together, and we put lifting lugs in it as well. So now this panel is 9.5 feet wide and 32 feet long. And at that point, moving it out of the garage, we have to disassemble the wall at the end, a big door area type, to lift it up and move it out. It's a little bit on the floppy side, but for a piece that is 3/4 of an inch thick and 9.5 feet by 32 feet, it's a big thing to be moving around. So we set it on a pair of wheels that are on an axle that we built some supports for with 4x4s and 2x4s, so that it was balanced and one person could control it and wheel it out. And we wheeled it out and put it under the boat for storage while we were building the second one. And with the lifting bolts, we just tied it to some areas under it and kept it out of the weather and gave us more room in the shop to work. Then we set it up on a wooden scaffolding on the ground, and I had to glue all of the legs for the solar panels. Each solar panel has 3 legs on each side, so there's 6 legs per panel. And with 20 panels, that's 120 tabs that had to get cut and made and positioned and glued. So we dry fitted it by actually mounting the feet on all of the panels, laying out all of the panels on the roof. This is where the walkway is going to be. That's why there's a gap there, because that's where the ladder comes up from the roof. So we got them all laid out and then marked, and then took them all off and glued all of the tabs on. Then we had to lift it up and put it on the framework for the roof. So we had a big box frame with straps around it for lifting it up, and a small crane truck to lift it up with and position it over the roof, lowering it into place. Then I had the task of attaching it to the frames. We already knew what adhesive we wanted to use, but the adhesive only has a 20-minute working time on it. And there is something like 130 linear feet of tubing that we have to put adhesive on to connect it to the roof. So there were two of us working on it. We drilled holes down through the roof panel, down through the aluminum tube, and put in about 6-inch long pieces of all thread. And then we lifted the roof by about 3 inches using a piece of 2x3 board stuck in a whole bunch of different places by the all thread, so that the roof was actually being held 3 inches higher than it would end up being. And then we went around and started laying the epoxy that was going to bond the roof on top of the aluminum frame. And as we got the adhesive down, then we would pull the 2x3 blocks out and let the roof lower down onto the frame. And once we got the entire thing glued and lowered, then we went back and tightened all of the all threads so it was held down securely. And then after all of the adhesive had dried the next day, then we came out, we pulled out the all thread and replaced it with stainless steel bolts, just because we wanted to fill the holes, and the bolts do add additional strength, even though it probably wasn't necessary at that point. The adhesive is a really aggressive adhesive. So here you can see the roof panels in place, the two separate sides, and the roof walkway that goes down the middle of everything. And then it was a matter of putting the solar panels in place in their final mounting up on the roof, 5 pairs per side. So there are 20 panels up on the roof. And that is our roof.